Imagine a day like any other. The sun shines, birds sing, then the sky erupts in a blinding flash. A mushroom cloud, a monument to destruction, climbs towards the heavens. This is the terrifying reality of nuclear war. The initial explosions vaporize everything in their immediate vicinity. Intense heat radiates outward, setting fire to anything flammable for miles. These infernos merge, creating firestorms of unimaginable ferocity. Temperatures soar higher than the surface of the sun. Buildings crumble. Forests vanish in an instant. The air itself superheats, creating a deadly shockwave that flattens everything in its path. This is only the beginning. The true horror of nuclear war lies in its lingering consequences, in the long shadow it casts over the future. As cities burn, the night sky is illuminated by the eerie glow of urban fires. The once vibrant cityscapes are now reduced to smoldering ruins, casting a haunting light over the desolation. Massive columns of smoke ascend into the atmosphere, creating an apocalyptic skyline. These towering plumes of smoke are not just a sign of destruction, but a harbinger of a much darker fate. These are not ordinary plumes of smoke. They are dense, dark, and foreboding, signaling the birth of something far more sinister. They are pyrocumulonimbus clouds, towering behemoths, fueled by the fires of Armageddon. These monstrous clouds are born from the intense heat and energy of the infernos below. These clouds carry soot and debris high into the stratosphere, far above the weather systems that would normally wash them away. The particles linger, creating a persistent veil that blocks out the sun. Here, the soot forms a shroud around the Earth, a barrier between us and the life-giving energy of the sun. This shroud is thick and impenetrable, casting a shadow over the entire planet. Sunlight is reflected back into space, unable to penetrate the dense layer of soot. The world below is plunged into darkness, deprived of the warmth and light it so desperately needs. The planet plunges into an artificial twilight. Day and night lose their meaning as the sky remains a constant, dimly lit grey. The once familiar rhythms of life are disrupted. Temperatures plummet, ushering in a period of unnatural cold that could last for years, even decades. This is nuclear winter, a chilling aftermath of the fires that once raged. The world as we know it ceases to exist. Abandoned cities and ruined landscapes become the new norm, a stark reminder of the fragility of our civilization. The delicate balance of our ecosystems is shattered. Flora and fauna struggle to survive in this new, harsh reality, and many species face extinction, and the worst is yet to come. The ominous clouds overhead are a constant reminder of the devastation that has been wrought and the uncertain future that lies ahead. The most immediate consequence of nuclear winter is the collapse of agriculture. Crops wither and die under the darkened sky. The global food supply chain, already strained by conflict, disintegrates entirely. Transportation networks crumble. Stores are looted and emptied. Famine takes hold. First it comes for the most vulnerable, the young, the elderly, the sick. But soon it consumes everyone. Desperate people fight over scraps, driven to unimaginable acts by the primal need to survive. The world's bread baskets, once teeming with life, become barren wastelands. The very air grows thick with the stench of decay. The horrors described above represent just one scenario, a limited nuclear exchange, perhaps between countries like India and Pakistan. In such a scenario, the immediate devastation would be catastrophic, with millions of lives lost in an instant. The fallout would not be confined to the borders of these two nations. Neighboring countries would also suffer from the radioactive contamination, leading to a regional crisis of unprecedented scale. The economic and environmental impacts would be felt for decades, if not centuries, as the affected areas struggle to recover from the nuclear fallout. As devastating as such an event would be, a full-scale nuclear war involving superpowers like the United States, Russia, or China would be infinitely worse. The sheer number of nuclear weapons possessed by these nations means that the scale of destruction would be unimaginable. Entire continents could be laid to waste, and the global climate would be irrevocably altered. The concept of mutually assured destruction, which has so far prevented such a conflict, would become a grim reality. Imagine hundreds, even thousands of nuclear detonations. Each explosion would release a fireball of intense heat, incinerating everything in its immediate vicinity. The shock waves would flatten buildings and the radiation would cause long-term health effects for survivors. The combined effect of these detonations would create a nuclear winter, blocking out sunlight and drastically lowering global temperatures. The planet would be engulfed in firestorms. These massive blazes would consume entire cities, turning them into charred ruins. The smoke and soot from these fires would rise into the atmosphere, contributing to the darkening of the skies and further exacerbating the nuclear winter. The skies would darken for generations. The lack of sunlight would disrupt agricultural cycles, leading to widespread famine. The cold and darkness would make it difficult for any form of life to thrive, pushing many species to the brink of extinction. Billions would die in the initial blasts and the ensuing nuclear winter. The infrastructure of modern civilization would be obliterated, leaving survivors to fend for themselves in a world that has been thrown back to the Stone Age. The loss of medical facilities, clean water and food supplies would lead to further deaths from disease and starvation. Civilization, as we know it, would cease to exist. The cultural and historical landmarks that define our heritage would be reduced to rubble. The social and political structures that govern our lives would collapse, leading to chaos and anarchy. The very survival of our species would be in doubt. Those who managed to find shelter would face a harsh and unforgiving environment. The psychological toll of living in constant fear and uncertainty would be immense, leading to widespread mental health issues. Those who managed to survive the initial blasts and the famine that followed would face a world poisoned by radiation. The long-term effects of radiation exposure would lead to increased rates of cancer and genetic mutations, affecting future generations. A world where every drop of water, every breath of air could be lethal. The contamination of natural resources would make it nearly impossible to sustain life, forcing survivors to constantly search for clean water and uncontaminated food. The struggle for survival would be relentless, with no end in sight. In the aftermath of a nuclear war, the lucky ones will be those who prepared. They will have built shelters, stocked supplies, and developed the skills necessary to survive in a hostile world. But even for them, life will be a constant struggle. They will face the constant threat of radiation poisoning. Food and clean water will be scarce. Medical care will be rudimentary at best, and perhaps most importantly, they will have to cope with the psychological trauma of living in a world forever scarred by war. The survivors of a nuclear war will be forced to rebuild civilization from the ground up. It will be a slow and arduous process, fraught with danger and uncertainty. If we are fortunate enough to avoid nuclear annihilation, the task of rebuilding will be monumental. The sheer scale of destruction will be unlike anything humanity has ever faced before. Entire cities will need to be reconstructed from the ground up, and this will require not just physical labor, but also immense resources and time. The infrastructure of our modern world will lie in ruins. Roads, bridges, and buildings that once stood as symbols of human achievement will be reduced to rubble. The challenge will be to not only rebuild, but to build back better, more resilient structures that can withstand future calamities. Communication networks will be down. The intricate web of connections that keeps our world running smoothly will be severed. Re-establishing these networks will be crucial for coordinating relief efforts and rebuilding communities. Transportation systems will be crippled. With roads and bridges destroyed, moving people and supplies will become a Herculean task. Innovative solutions will be needed to restore mobility and ensure that aid reaches those in need. And the very air we breathe will be contaminated. Pollution and debris will make the environment hazardous, posing serious health risks. Cleaning the air and ensuring safe living conditions will be a top priority. The survivors will need to draw upon all their ingenuity and resilience to create a new world. Communities will have to come together, pooling their skills and resources to overcome the immense challenges ahead. They will need to develop new forms of energy, as traditional power sources may no longer be viable. Renewable energy solutions like solar and wind will become essential for powering the new world. New ways to grow food, as conventional agriculture may be disrupted. Urban farming and innovative agricultural techniques will be necessary to ensure food security, and new ways to communicate, In the absence of modern technology, survivors will have to rely on basic communication methods to stay connected and coordinate their efforts, and they will need to do it all while coping with the psychological trauma of living in a post-apocalyptic world. The emotional and mental toll will be immense, and providing support for mental health will be just as important as physical rebuilding. The road to recovery will be long and difficult. It will require perseverance, determination, and a collective effort from all of humanity. But it is a road we must be prepared to travel if we are to survive as a species. Together we can rebuild and create a future that is stronger and more resilient than ever before. The spectre of nuclear war hangs over humanity like a sword of Damocles. The destructive power of these weapons is almost unimaginable. And yet we continue to live in a world where thousands of these weapons exist, ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. The responsibility for preventing nuclear war rests with each and every one of us. We must demand that our leaders pursue policies of peace and disarmament. We must support organizations working to reduce nuclear stockpiles and prevent the proliferation of these weapons. We must educate ourselves and others about the dangers of nuclear war. And we must never forget the horrors that would be unleashed if these weapons were ever used again. The future of humanity hangs in the balance. On one hand, we have the potential for progress and prosperity for a world where poverty, disease, and war are distant memories. On the other hand, we have the very real possibility of nuclear annihilation, of a future where our planet is reduced to a smoldering wasteland. The choice is ours. We can choose to continue down the path of militarism and aggression, a path that leads inevitably to destruction. Or we can choose the path of peace, cooperation, and diplomacy, a path that offers hope for a brighter future. The path is clear, the choice is ours. The time for complacency is over. The threat of nuclear war is real, and it is growing. We must act now to prevent this catastrophe from happening. We must demand that our leaders take concrete steps to reduce nuclear stockpiles, prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons, and pursue diplomacy over conflict. We must invest in education and dialogue to foster understanding and cooperation between nations. We must work tirelessly to build a world where peace is not just a dream, but a living reality. The future of humanity is in our hands. Let us choose wisely. Let us choose peace.